The Prophet's birth. The Prophet Muhammad, may Allah shower his blessings and peace upon him, was born in Makkah on Monday the 9th of Rabiul Awwal 4 in the spring season in the year of the elephants, when Makkah al-Mukarramah was attacked with an army comprising elephants, corresponding to 22 April 571 CE, between the dawn and the sunrise. He was the only son of his parents. His father had died before he was born. His grandfather, Abdul Muttalib, had himself experienced the pang of orphanhood. When he heard the news of the birth of his grandson, the orphan of his 44-year deceased son Abdullah, he came home, took the newborn to Al-Haram, prayed for him there, and brought him back. On the seventh day, he sacrificed an animal and invited the people of his tribe, the Quraysh, to a feast. When the guests inquired of him the name of the child, Abdul Muttalib mentioned that he had named his grandson Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wassallam, the praised one. His tribesmen were surprised, as this was quite an unusual name, not used in the society of the time. Abdul Muttalib explained that he in fact wished his grandson to be known in the world as a person deserving genuine appreciation and acclaim. Babyhood days. Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Mother Amina fed him her milk first. After 2-3 days, Thuwayba, Abu Lahab's maid, fed him her milk. In those days, the rich and the noble Arabs used to send their newborn babies to nearby villages to be raised among the Bedouin, so that the children could acquire eloquence in the Arabic language and learn the traditional Arab values from them. A few days after the birth of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, some women from the Hawazin tribe came to Makkah in search of such babies. Sadia Halima was among them. By chance, she could not get any such child to rear. The mother of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam wanted her to take the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and raise him under her care in her village. Sadia Halima, however, was not much interested at the beginning, as she did not expect any lucrative reward for taking care of an orphan. But at the same time, she did not want to return without a child. So, ultimately, she accepted the request of Hazrat Amina and took Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, with her. After 2 years, she brought him back to Makkah to his mother. But as in those days an epidemic had spread in Makkah, Hazrat Amina asked her to keep the baby sallallahu alaihi wasallam with her for some more time. Halima did accordingly. Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, loved Sadia Halima very much. When he was entrusted with prophethood, her husband Harith bin Abdul Uzza visited him in Makkah and inquired him about his message. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told him that the day would come soon when he would show him that he told the truth. Harith accepted Islam. Death of Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, mother and grandfather, and security of Abu Talib. When Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, 6 years old, his mother, Bibi Amina, took him to Medina with her. She stayed there in the Najjar family, who were related to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam from his paternal side. Ayman, a maid and caretaker of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was with her. Bibi Amina stayed there for a month. While returning to Makkah, she breathed her last at a place called Abwa. She was buried there. Ayman brought Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to Makkah. After the death of Prophet Muhammad's mother, his grandfather Abdul Muttalib took him under his guardianship. He always kept him close. When he died at the age of 82, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was 8 years old. When his bier was being carried to the graveyard, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam followed weeping love for his dead guardian. At the time of his death, Abdul Muttalib entrusted the responsibility of the Prophet's guardianship to his son Abu Talib. Abu Talib loved the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam very dearly and preferred him even to his children. He used to take him to sleep in his bed with him and kept him in his company when he went out. When Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was approximately 10, he used to take a herd of goats out in the field to graze. This was, in fact, a prelude to his ultimate career as a caretaker of the world. During the day of prophethood, he used to talk about his experience of this simple and interesting engagement. Once, when the Prophet sallallahu, alaihi, wassallam went to a forest with his companions, they started picking berries and eating them. The Prophet instructed them to pick berries which were black in color, saying that they were more tasteful. He added that he had learned it from his boyhood experience when he used to bring his herd there for grazing. Abu Talib was a trader. The Quraysh used to go to Syria once a year for trade. The Prophet sallallahu, alaihi, wassallam was about 12 when Abu Talib planned to travel to Syria on a business trip. He did not wish to take Prophet Muhammad sallallahu, alaihi, wassallam with him for the fear of the hardships of the journey or for some other reason. But when Abu Talib was about to leave, the Prophet sallallahu, alaihi, wassallam grabbed him and held him tight out of love for him. Abu Talib did not like to disappoint his nephew and decided to take him along. Participation in the Battle of Fijar and the Fuzul Armistice. In Arabia, until the advent of Islam, battles among the tribes were a continuous and common phenomenon, in which the Battle of Fijar was the most famous for its ferocity and consequences. It was fought between the Quraysh and the Qays tribes. As the Quraysh were a party, the Prophet sallallahu, alaihi, wassallam also participated in it as a member of the tribe, but he did not raise his hands on any person. The incessant chain of tribal battles had destroyed hundreds of families. Killing and cruelty had become traditions that tribes considered as their moral obligation to keep up. This situation created a desire in some persons for a reform. When people returned from the Battle of Fijar, Zubair bin Muttalib, who was the Prophet's uncle and a leader of the family, raised this issue. As a result, the families of Hashim, Zahra, and Taim tribes gathered in the house of Abdullah bin Jad'an and came to an agreement that they would support the oppressed and oppose the oppressor to the extent of forcing him to leave Makkah if necessary. The Prophet sallallahu, alaihi, wasallam participated in that agreement. He used to say, after he was invested as prophet, that he would not go back on that agreement for a material gain as priceless as a red camel. He also added that he would readily respond if he were ever called in the name of that agreement. The Prophet sallallahu, alaihi, wassallam had joined his uncle Abu Talib earlier in some of his business trips, in which he had gained necessary experience for conducting trade. Besides, his righteousness in dealings had become well known in the society. Hazrat Abdullah bin Abil Hamsa, a companion, related that once he had entered into a business dealing with the Prophet sallallahu, alaihi, wasallam before his prophethood, which was not finalized yet, he promised the Prophet sallallahu, alaihi, wasallam that he would return after a short while, but he forgot about it. When he came back to the place of appointment after 3 days, he found the Prophet sallallahu, alaihi, wasallam waiting there for him. The Prophet sallallahu, alaihi, wasallam did not show any resentment for his failure to keep his word. He simply told him that he caused him inconvenience, for he kept on waiting for him there for all those 3 days. Subhanallah. Prophet sallallahu, alaihi, wasallam. Marriage with Hazrat Khadija raziyallahu anha, a widow living in Makkah, who had a very noble lineage. She was very rich and used to run her own business. When she heard about the Prophet's honesty, trustworthiness, and good management, she offered him to work for her and do a business for her that she would finance. The Prophet sallallahu, alaihi, wasallam traveled to Syria with her merchandise on a business trip, which turned out to be very profitable. A slave of Khadija raziyallahu anha, may Allah be pleased with her, called Maysara, was with the Prophet sallallahu, alaihi, wasallam that journey. On his return, he told her about the good qualities and nobleness of the Prophet sallallahu, alaihi, wasallam that he had witnessed during the journey. Impressed by his qualities, she herself proposed to the Prophet sallallahu, alaihi, wasallam and entered into marriage with him, although she had turned down the proposal of renowned chiefs earlier, renovation of Kaaba and prevention of a trouble. By that time, the righteousness and nobility of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam so very well established in the society that people called him by the titles Sadiq, the truthful, and Amin, the trustworthy, instead of his real name. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam 35, when the Quraysh took up the work of the renovation of Kaaba, the walls of which had suffered dilapidation due to flood. Although it was a joint project shared by all tribes, the placing of Hijr Aswad, the black stone, in the wall became a point of dispute. Each tribe alone wanted to have the honor to put it in its place. The dispute grew into a big brawl, leading to the fear of an armed confrontation. It was a tradition in Arabia that, if a person wished to take an oath to lay down his life for a cause, he dipped his fingers in a bowl full of blood. Some claimants followed this tradition on that occasion. The dispute remained unresolved for 4 days. On the 5th day, Abu Umayyah bin Mughira, who was the most honorable leader of the Quraysh, suggested that the person who entered Al-Haram first the next morning should be taken as arbitrator on that issue. All of them accepted this proposal. As was the divine will, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was the first to enter Al-Haram the next day. When the people saw him, they all happily acclaimed, "The trustworthy is here. We all are ready to accept his decision." The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam resolved the issue with intelligence and understanding in such a way that all were pleased. He spread a sheet of cloth and put the black stone on it by himself. Then he asked the chiefs of all tribes to hold the sheet and bring it close to the place where the stone was to be fixed. Then he picked up the stone by himself and placed it in the wall of the Kaaba. Thus he saved the situation and averted a bloody war. Otherwise, the Arabs used to pick a fight on much pettier incidents, such as letting their herd drink water first, competing with each other in a horse race, and composing verses showing the superiority of their tribes, which lasted very long, sometimes for decades. Prophet's divine care and training. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam never practiced any act of shirk polytheism, even in the days when he was not yet invested as prophet. Once the Quraysh invited him to partake of a meal which was an offering to the idols. The animal whose meat was served was slaughtered in the name of an idol. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam refused to eat that food. He had started denouncing the practice of idol worship before he was invested as prophet and forbade those who trusted him from indulging in it. When the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was born, Makkah was the hub of idol worship. In the Kaaba itself, 360 idols were installed. An additional point of superiority that the family of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam enjoyed was that they were the caretakers and key bearers of Kaaba. In spite of it, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not ever bow his head in front of an idol, nor did he ever participate in any rite of ignorance. In order to uphold their position of privilege, the Quraysh had made it a rule that they did not go, like other pilgrims, to Arafat on the occasion of Hajj. They had also made a rule that the pilgrims coming from outside should either adopt the dress of the Quraysh or perform the tawaf, going round the Kaaba 7 times, naked. That is why performing of tawaf naked had become quite common. But the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam never supported his family in such matters. In Arabia of the time, storytelling was a popular pastime. At night, people used to gather at a place after finishing their day's work and listen to a professional's narration with great interest. In his boyhood days, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had also once wanted to attend one such gathering. While on the way, he stopped for a while to watch a marriage celebration, where he was overcome by sleep. When he woke up, it was morning already. One more time the same incident happened. Twice only during his 40 years of age, he tried to attend such a gathering, but each time he was saved from participating in an engagement like that which did not match his ultimate mission. Your position is above such engagements. Invested as prophet. As the time of Hazrat Muhammad's appointment as prophet came close, he sallallahu alaihi wasallam developed an increasing desire to stay in seclusion. He used to take water and sattu, flour to be used as food, and retire to a cave on Mount Hira, which was an uninhabited place and was several miles from Makkah. There he remained engaged in acts of worship, which included zikr, remembrance of Allah, and reflection on the divine signs. He stayed in seclusion there until his stock of water and food lasted. Now the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to have dreams, which were so true that what he saw in a dream at night appeared in reality in the day. One day when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was in the cave of Hira, an angel appeared to him. He told him, "Read." The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam replied, "I am unlettered." Upon it, the angel took him within the fold of his arms and embraced him so hard that he felt exhausted. The angel left him then and said again, "Read." The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam replied again, "I am not formally educated." He took him again in his arms and held him tight with a great force, and then released. The third time he asked him, "Read." The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave him the same reply. The angel then recited these verses, which now form a part of a chapter in the Quran, in the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. Read, in the name of your Lord who has created all that exists. He has created man from a clot, a piece of thick coagulated blood. Read, and your Lord is the most generous, who has taught, the writing, by the pen. He has taught man that which he knew not. Al-Alaq 1-5. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam returned home soon after this incident, lay in his bed, and asked his wife Khadija radhiyallahu anha to cover him with some cloth. When he overcame the feeling of shock, he told his wife that he had witnessed things threatening to his life. His wife offered consolation to him by saying, "Why should you fear anything? I see that you are kind to your relatives, speak truth, support widows, orphans, and the helpless, host guests, and sympathize with sufferers. Allah will never let an affliction befall you." But then Khadija radhiyallahu anha herself felt the need to be assured that her husband was not in danger. So she took the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to her cousin, Warqa bin Nawfal, who knew the Ibrani, Hebrew language, and was a scholar of Tawrite, the Torah, and Injil, the Gospel. At the behest of Khadija radhiyallahu anha, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam narrated to Warqa the event of the angel Jibrail's coming to him and his conversation with him. Warqa immediately spoke out that it was the same angel which used to come down to Hazrat Musa, Prophet Moses, to bring to him the divine message. Warqa wished that he were alive when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would be forced to leave his hometown. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam inquired in surprise if he would be forced out of town. Warqa replied in the affirmative and explained that whoever had called his people to a divine message was met with enmity at the beginning. He said that he wished to remain alive until the time of the Prophet's emigration, Hijrah, so that he could be of service to him. One day, the angel Jibrail led the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to the edge of the cave where he made wudu in front of him. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam also made wudu in the same way, and then both of them offered salah together. The angel Jibrail led the salah, preaching of Islam. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam began to preach Islam now. Khadija radhiyallahu anha, his wife, Ali radhiyallahu anhu, his cousin aged 8, Abu Bakr radhiyallahu anhu, his friend, and Zayd bin Haritha radhiyallahu anhu, his slave, accepted Islam the very first day. Their acceptance of Islam was a very strong proof of their trust in the Prophet's truthfulness, as they had been close witnesses of his private and public life for 40 years. Bilal radhiyallahu anhu, Amr bin Abbas radhiyallahu anhu, and Khalid bin Sa'ad bin As radhiyallahu anhu also embraced Islam after a few days. Abu Bakr radhiyallahu anhu was a wealthy businessman and had a cloth shop in Mecca. He had a wide circle of friends and acquaintances. Upon his call, Uthman bin Affan radhiyallahu anhu, Zubair, Abdul Rahman bin Auf, Talha, and Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas radhiyallahu anhu came to the fold of Islam. After them, Abu Ubaidah, Amir bin Abdullah bin al-Jarrah radhiyallahu anhu, later known as Aminul Ummah, the trustee of the community, Abdul Asad bin Bilal, Uthman bin Maz'un, Amir bin Fuhayra Azdi, Abu Huzaifa bin Utbar, Sa'b bin Uthman bin Maz'un, and Arqam Sahabas entered into Islam. In women, after Ummul Mu'mineen, mother of the believers, Hazrat Khadija radhiyallahu anha, Ummul Fazl, wife of the Prophet's uncle Abbas radhiyallahu anhu, Asma bint Umayz, Asma bint Abu Bakr, and Fatma, sister of Umar, became Muslims. In those days, Muslims used to say their salah, prayers, in a valley. Once when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was saying his salah there with Hazrat Ali Abu Talib, his uncle, accidentally came upon them. Surprised at the new way of saying prayers, he stopped there and watched them. When they completed their prayers, he inquired of them what religion that was. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam replied that it was the religion of their grandfather, Prophet Ibrahim alaihi salam. Abu Talib told them that although he was not willing to embrace that religion, they had his full support to follow it. He also assured the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that nobody would dare to oppose him. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam preached Islam in secret for 3 years. But now the time for inviting people openly had arrived, and so the Qur'anic message was revealed to him. Herefore proclaim openly Allah's message. Al-Hijr 94. He also received the instruction, and warn your tribe, O Muhammad, of near kindred. Ash-Shu'ara 214. One day, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked Hazrat Ali to arrange for a feast. In fact, this was the first occasion for him to convey the message of Islam openly. The whole family of Abdul Muttalib, including Hamza, Abu Talib, and Abbas, were invited. After they finished eating, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam stood up at his place and thus addressed the guests. I have brought such a thing which would suffice for a person both in this world as well as in the hereafter. Who will help me in shouldering this heavy burden? All present in the gathering remained silent. Suddenly, Hazrat Ali stood up and said, Although I am suffering from pain in my eyes and my legs are thin, I will help you. It was an odd sight for the Quraysh to see that 2 persons, one of whom was only 13 years old, were announcing their intention to change the world. They could not control their laughter. But future developments proved that what the 2 said at that time turned out to be a reality later. One day the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam ascended the Mount Safa and called the people from there. When they gathered, he asked them, Do you consider me truthful or a liar? The audience replied in one voice, We have never heard you uttering a lie or saying an indecent thing. We know you as Sadiq, the truthful, and Amin, the trustworthy. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said thereupon, Look, I am standing now on top of the hill while you stand beneath. I am thus able to see at both sides of the hill. If I tell you that I am seeing a band of armed bandits the other side which intends to attack Makkah, will you believe it? Certainly, they replied, because we have no reason to disbelieve a person of integrity like you, especially when you are standing at a high place from where you could see both sides. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, This was an example to make my point clear. Now know it that death is close at hand, and that you have to appear in front of Allah. I am seeing the world after death as clearly as you are seeing the present world. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam made an attempt this way to show them the role of a prophet and to convince them by giving an example that it was possible for a person to see the hereafter while thousands of others were not able to see it. Called toward Tawheed and violent opposition of polytheists. At that time, the number of Muslims had grown to 40. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wassallam went to Al-Haram and proclaimed Tawheed, oneness of God, there. This immediately raised a stir among the disbelievers as they considered it a serious insult to Al-Haram. They attacked the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam from all sides. Learning about it, Harith bin Abi Hala, son of Hazrat Khadija from her first husband, who was at his home, rushed to Al-Haram and tried to shield him. But the swords fell upon him from all sides, and he fell a martyr. This was the first instance when the earth was colored with blood for the sake of Islam. Now the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam started preaching publicly. He went to each and every fair as well as to narrow streets, explained to the people the value of Tawheed, and forbade them from worshipping idols, stones, and trees. He preached that they should believe in God as being free from all shortcomings and limitations, and have firm faith that the earth and the skies, the moon and the sun, and all small and big things are Allah's creation and are totally dependent on Him. It is he explained, who accepts a supplication, cures the sick, and grants a wish. None can do anything without Allah's permission. Even the angels and the prophets are unable to do anything against His will. In those days, Ukaz, Uyina, and Zil-Majaz were famous fairs in Arabia, which were thickly attended by people from distant places. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wassallam used to visit these fairs and preach Islam and Tawheed to the people there. When the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam started preaching Tawheed and denouncing idol worship openly, some chiefs of the Quraysh complained to Abu Talib about it. Abu Talib consoled them, but as the point of dispute remained, and as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not stop preaching, a delegation came to Abu Talib again. It comprised all important chiefs of the Quraysh, such as Utbah bin Rabi'ah, Shaybah, Abu Sufyan, As bin Hisham, Abu Jahl, Walid bin Mughira, and As bin Wa'il. They complained that as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam denounced their deities and accused their forefathers as misguided and foolish, Abu Talib should either withdraw his support from him or openly side with him to fight against them so that the dispute is decided forever. When Abu Talib realized the grimness of the situation, seeing that the Quraysh were serious and that he alone was not strong enough to face their united strength, he expressed his helplessness to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in a brief remark. "Dear to me as my life, don't put on me a burden that I may not be able to bear." Apparently, the only support that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had was from Abu Talib. When the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam noticed that Abu Talib was wavering, he told him with tearful eyes, "By Allah, if these people put the sun in my one hand and the moon in the other, I will not forsake preaching. Either Allah will bring this mission to fulfillment, or I will sacrifice my life for it." The sincere resoluteness of the Prophet's voice deeply touched the heart of Abu Talib. He assured him of his support in these words, "Go. None will be able to do any harm to you." The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam continued to propagate Islam. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam continued to propagate Islam. Although the Quraysh could not dare to make an attempt on his life, they missed no opportunity to persecute him. They strew thorns in his path, put filth on his body while he was engaged in prayers, and cast aspersions on him. Abdullah bin Amr bin al-As relates as eyewitness that one day when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was offering salah in Al-Haram, Uqba bin Abi Mu'ayt came there. He rolled his sheet in the form of a rope, and when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam went in prostration, sajda, he put the sheet around his neck and started tightening it. Although the sheet had started pressing his neck very badly, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam remained patient. Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq radhiyallahu anhu pushed Utbah away and recited the verse of the Qur'an. Would you kill a man because he says, "My Lord is Allah, and he has come to you with clear signs, proofs from your Lord"? Ghafir 40:28. Some rogues attacked Abu Bakr and seriously hit him. On another occasion, when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was offering salah in al-Haram, some members of the Quraysh assembled in an open area inside the Kaaba. Abu Jahl said that a camel was slaughtered that day, the intestine of which was thrown out at a place. He suggested that somebody should bring it from there and put it over the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he was in prostration. Uqba rose from his place, brought the camel's intestine, and put it over the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam while he was engaged in prayers. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam remained fully engrossed in his prayers. The Quraysh started laughing loudly, enjoying their indecent joke and falling upon each other in merriment. Ibn Mas'ud, a companion of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was watching it all, but he dared not intervene due to the presence of a large number of disbelievers there. Suddenly, Fatma Zahra, the daughter of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, came upon the scene. She removed the dirt from the back of her father and scolded the rogues. Once, the opponents assembled to decide what they should tell the persons coming to Makkah from outside about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam so that they were not influenced by him. One of them suggested that they should tell them that he was a soothsayer. Walid bin Mughira, an aged person, opposed by saying that he had seen several soothsayers and that the rattling of the soothsayers was no match to the sayings of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He underscored that they should not say anything that the Arabs coming from other places to Makkah might reject as untrue. Upon it, another person suggested that they should declare Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as insane. Walid opposed it also by pointing out that insanity had nothing to do with him. A third person proposed that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam should be projected as a willful poet. Walid retorted that the Arabs knew very well what poetry was and would find out that the Prophet's recitations were never poetic compositions. Yet another suggestion came to the floor that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam should be accused of being a magician. Walid commented in disappointment that the magicians were known for their weird appearance and dirty habits, and that Prophet Muhammad's lifestyle was, in contrast, so clean and sophisticated. Thereupon, the audience left the matter to Walid and asked him to come up with a suggestion. He said that he honestly believed that Muhammad's words had an appeal, and his conversation was filled with sweetness. He suggested that the only thing that could be said against him was that his words were such which separated a son from his father, a brother from his brother, and a husband from his wife, and so people should stay away from him. All agreed to Walid's proposal. After this consultation, they used to sit by the pathways leading to Makkah and tell the incoming people about the ill effects of listening to the words of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Utbah's conversation with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When the disbelievers of Makkah noticed that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was not ready to give up propagating Islam, they decided to buy him with a lucrative offer, or frighten him with a threat, hoping that one such tactic would make him yield. Utbah, a famous chief of Makkah, offered to meet him for this purpose. He visited him and thus spoke, "My nephew Muhammad, if you intend to collect wealth this way, we will ourselves amass for you so much wealth that you will become very rich. If you wish to achieve respect and prestige, we will take you as our chief. If you, however, want to be a ruler, we will appoint you the king of Arabia. We are ready to fulfill any of your demands, but do give up this practice of yours. Or if you feel that you have developed a mental ailment, tell us so that we arrange for your treatment." The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wassallam patiently replied, "Whatever you said about me is untrue. I don't want to achieve wealth, honor, or sovereignty, nor do I suffer from any mental ailment. You will understand my position better with the help of the following verses from the Quran. Hamim. These letters are one of the miracles of the Quran, and none but Allah alone knows their meanings. A revelation from Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. A book whereof the verses are explained in detail. A Quran in Arabic for people who know. Giving glad tidings of paradise to one who believes in the oneness of Allah, i.e., Islamic monotheism, and fears Allah much, abstains from all kinds of sins and evil deeds, and loves Allah much, performing all kinds of good deeds which He has ordained, and warning of punishment in hellfire to the one who disbelieves in the oneness of Allah. But most of them turn away, so they hear not. And they say, Our hearts are under coverings, screened, from that to which you invite us, and in our ears is deafness, and between us and you is a screen. So work you on your way. Verily, we are working on our way. Hamim Sajda 1-5. Utbah was enraptured by listening to the verses of the Quran. Reclining on his hands while his head was tilted backward, he listened to the verses and at the end rose silently and left the place. When he returned to his people, he was a different person. The chiefs of the Quraysh noticed the change from his facial expression and told one another, Look, Utbah looks different. They, nevertheless, inquired him as to what he saw, said, and heard. Utbah replied, O people of Quraysh, I heard from Muhammad such words that are neither soothsaying nor poetic composition, nor words of charm. If you like, take my advice, leave Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wassallam alone. By hearing Utbah's suggestion, they commented in disappointment that the words of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam had influenced even Utbah. Hey, amazing my YouTube family! Thank you for watching Spiritual Miracle Tales. We hope these stories have touched your heart and inspired your soul. If you enjoyed our content, please subscribe to our channel and share these tales with your friends and family. Your support helps us bring more uplifting and miraculous stories to the community. May peace and blessings be upon you. Stay tuned for more inspiring tales. Don't forget to like, comment, and spread the love.